My name is Renee Hausheer. I'm a medical doctor, a physician. I practice in Lawton, Oklahoma, just outside of Medicine Park. I have been a physician now for 44 years, a long time. I practice in the field of comprehensive ophthalmology, so I'm an eye surgeon. I'm now emeritus professor from the Department of Ophthalmology, and I work in my rural community. I'm medical director of a free eye clinic and a free women's health system that we operate there. The scientific study of NDE and how I came about wondering about that really was based on my own NDE, which occurred when I was 20 years old in the year of 1977. At the time of this, I was 2 years into medical school training out of 6 years, so I was almost halfway through. And I scoured the literature. I looked everywhere scientifically for anything to explain this. I didn't know what to call it. The term NDE I never came across. And so I started to try to look for answers to what happened to me. And so I instead opened the Holy Bible. And in that endeavor decided to read all I could about the topics of heaven and hell. And to my surprise, there was way more topics on hell than there were on heaven. In my NDE, I did not go to hell. In my NDE, I went to heaven straight in, no barrier. And I wanted to understand why this happened to me. I didn't like that it happened to me because I couldn't really talk to other people about it. When this happened to me, my NDE, I did talk with my father about it, and to my surprise, he had this too at the age of 4. So I really enjoyed talking with my father over the years, off and on, about this, and so that's really what promulgated it, because I don't think most humans talk or think about their own demise, their own final death, unless you have a good reason to do so, such as in my case. Scientifically, for me, you can do prospective studies, you can do retrospective studies. And I think because of the nature of near-death experience, we really, at this point, scientifically, are best served by looking at retrospective analysis. And in that analysis, when you review the thousands and thousands of different scenarios, which cross globally all cultures, all religions, all languages, etc., and you look for commonality in them, there have been shown by various different people, including Dr. Jeffrey Long, 9 different areas of evidence for common threads that are found within NDE. And I won't name them all for you now, but for example, I'm an ophthalmologist, and it's fascinating to me, having cared for the blind all my life, that there are blind, and these people see absolutely nothing, never have, many of them. And yet they have had near-death experience where their vision accurately describes their surroundings at the time of their near-death out-of-body experience. And that's irrefutable. It's remarkable, to say the least, and miraculous. Another very common line of evidence of these 9 things is an out-of-body type of experience. The other issue, and I relate to this very well, is the ineffability of the experience, the inability to feel that you can accurately describe in a good sense what happened to you during your NDE, because there's not human words that describe the colors or the extraordinary love that goes on when you have these experiences. Another line of evidence is there seems to be a tunnel. And to me, I really didn't have a tunnel, but I left the darkness behind and traveled towards light. So that's another common thread. There's more than that, but those are just some of the things that are quite remarkable, and they're repeatable. And I was very delighted when I found that this had been discovered. But to look at prospective is too difficult, I think, to do and to set up accurately, because no one plans their near death at all. I don't think we have to change it, but we have to broaden our scientific viewpoints to include and incorporate meaningful things such as near-death. Near-death experiences are no doubt different for the scientific community, but yet they offer the concepts of hope and of why are we here? What is our existence to mean? What is the meaning of life? Which science correlates and corroborates with that, in that it really looks for truth. And anyone that's had an NDE also, I think, seeks the same thing, of truth. So those two concepts are different, yet truth is what combines or joins them together. So my NDE happened in 1977 when I was 20 years old. I was a medical student at the time. I was going to school 11 months out of the year. We took 1 month a year off for rest and vacation. I was on my family vacation with my parents and my brothers, and while there I developed an upper respiratory infection, a cold. I came back early because I had to take an exam at the university, and while I was taking my exam, I started having double vision. And I noticed the exam went for 3 to 4 hours, and I noticed that during my exam, it wasn't just double vision, I had to close one eye, but my eyelids were becoming heavy, like I couldn't open them, and I thought, well, this is odd. And so at the conclusion of the exam, I drove myself back to my apartment, and I told my roommate, her name was Kim, about what happened to me. And she and I, being medical students, were trying to diagnose me. We couldn't figure it out. So I called my father, who was an OBGYN physician, and I told him about it. And he said, come now, drive to the hospital where I'm at, and we'll have a look. So I did. And I noticed I had to drive holding my eyelid up to even see to get there. When I got there, my father was there, and he met me with a neurologist and a neurosurgeon. And honestly, they were most concerned at the time I got there that I might have multiple sclerosis, which is what my mother had had. But I started having a descending paralysis, in that the next thing that happened was my jaws, like to chew food or to swallow food, was becoming more difficult. And I thought, well, this is really odd. And I couldn't figure out as a medical student what in the world would be doing this, but they told me, so this was on a Saturday, and then the next day, the neurologist, who was a young neurologist, he came into my room and he said, well, we think you have one of two things. You either have myasthenia gravis or you may have Guillain-Barré. And he said, so I'm going to do a test where I give you an intravenous dose of physostigmine, a medication. It's an anticholinesterase inhibitor. And I'm going to give that to you to see if you feel better when I administer this. And that would help us determine whether you have Guillain-Barré or myasthenia. And he couldn't figure out what I had, because each time it was equivocal. It was not clear-cut in terms of the results. And he didn't mean to, but he accidentally gave me way too much. He gave me 4 times the dose I should have had. And what I actually had was Guillain-Barré, which is rare. About 1 in 100,000 people get this. And so meanwhile, it's a Sunday. I'm in a hospital that's a community hospital. There's not too many people in because it's Sunday and people are at church. And so they put me in a wheelchair shortly after he administered this to me in 4 sequential doses. And when I went to the Department of Respiratory Therapy, because I was explaining to him that at that point I couldn't raise my shoulders, I couldn't swallow, I couldn't smile, I couldn't open my eyelids without lifting them, but I couldn't hold a phone to my ear. My hands and my arms were getting weak. And then I felt, at that point, I felt like I was having more trouble breathing. And I thought, so I was explaining to my neurologist that I felt like if you've ever done 200 push-ups and you just can't do one more because you're tired, I felt that way when it came to breathing. And I was really feeling exhausted. I could do it, but I had to think about it. It was not easy to just take a simple breath. And so I was taken by wheelchair and left there, and there was one person in the Department of Respiratory Therapy. She was a respiratory therapist, and she was taking my history, and I was explaining this to her. I was sitting in a chair, and I was explaining to her that I just felt I was really struggling to breathe. When I'm talking to her, like mid-sentence, the next thing I know, I am maybe 30 feet off the ground, and I'm looking, and I feel like I'm in a movie theater because it's kind of dark here, and wherever I look, my vision is extraordinary. Like if you think about the tip of a straight pin, I can see that well. But if you've ever gone scuba diving, for example, 30 feet away is quite a ways. And just by looking, I could see through anything. I could see through walls, ceilings. I was 3 feet up at the top of the hospital at the moment this happened, but I didn't know where I was. I thought I was in a movie, and this poor lady was frantic and worried about this body that was on the ground, and it was clear to me there was nobody inside of that body, and why in the world was she so upset about this? Not only that, but she was trying to resuscitate this person, and I thought, that made no sense. Why? And so I tried to communicate with her. And I was trying to talk with her and reason with her that this made no sense. Obviously, we don't resuscitate just a body when there's no soul inside of there. I couldn't get through to her, and I found it to be very frustrating. And my reasoning was, well, I must be in a movie theater. And I felt no attachment whatsoever to this body that was down there. Meanwhile, while I'm contemplating these things, I'm looking around, and there's this ball of loving light, living, loving light that's up and to my right. And it doesn't make me come to it. It doesn't force me, but I cannot wait to go towards it. It's a natural thing. And I was so overwhelmed because it represented what I'm going to describe as pure love, which is different than what we know here on earth. Here on earth, our love is commingled with hate. And there, with this thing, it was only pure love. And it was the most brilliant, radiant, colorful, glorious, and it knew me. And I felt like I knew it. And I don't know if I did, but I felt this way. And I could not wait to go with it, because I was getting nowhere with this lady down here who was all worried about this body on the ground. I couldn't figure out why she was worried about this, and I couldn't get through to her. So I started traveling with this, and as I followed it, this darkness here and the evil and hate that were here, commingled with love and goodness here, left, and I only was with love and goodness and joy. And partway there, I realized I was dying. It hadn't occurred to me when I initially had this happen. And I thought, oh my, and as the moment I thought that to myself, I suspended movement. I stopped. And I thought, well, I'm only 20, but I could not wait to go with this beautiful, loving light. So just by desiring, I continued to go. And I couldn't wait to see where we were going. And when I followed it, I became one with it, and we transferred into this unexplainable place that was full of what I'm going to describe as glorious souls. The transfer of pure love was different there than the love we know here. Let me give you an example. So here on earth, we have what I describe as conditional love. I will love you if you do this for me. That sort of thing is not what I'm talking about. This is a love that is pure in origin. And if you've ever come home from work, you don't say this out loud, but the minute you open your door and cross the threshold into your home, you're like, oh, I'm home, in your head. Well, when I landed in this place, I was home. I had been there before. This was the place from where I actually originated. It was familiar. And there were there were glorious souls, minus their human body, that were squealing with glee that I had arrived. And they were just thrilled beyond words. And I could talk to them all at once, which is such a woman thing to do, because I could talk to them all at once at the same time and have meaningful, deep conversations. The degree of wisdom was immediate among myself as well as these people, and it was profound. And I don't mean to say that the wisdom we each had was equal to that of God or was greater than that of God. I'm not suggesting that. I'm instead suggesting that it was simply profoundly greater than what we have here on earth. And so when I got there, my immediate question was, I was just given to know in general terms that if I could stay or I could return. I couldn't make a wrong decision. And whether I knew these people, whether these people had been my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents or who they were, I don't know. But it didn't matter to me because I absolutely loved them and they loved me. And so in general terms, I was wondering what I would do if I were to go back, because the body I left behind was paralyzed and was having a descending paralysis. So just in general terms, I was given to know not to worry about that, that if I chose to return, that my paralysis would leave. And then I was wondering, what should I do? I had thought that I should be in medicine, and just in general terms, I thought, how can I do that if I can't finish medical school? And in general terms, I was given to know not to worry about that. If I chose to come back, that indeed it was, and this is not my words, this was the words they gave me. I remember it well. They said, it is your calling to be a physician in medicine and not to worry about that. And I thought, okay. And then I was given something I didn't ask for, but to this day I'm thankful for. At that point in my life, I had not been to a funeral. I had not ever lost someone I loved. I had my grandparents. And if I had a missing grandparent, I had not been alive when that grandparent died, so I didn't know anybody that had died. And I didn't ask for this, but I was given to feel my parents' anguish and grief should I make the decision of staying. And I thought, how profound, how terrible, how difficult this was. And just in general terms, I was given to know that yes, agree, it is tough, but it's important that you know this, but understand that over time, your parents' grief will lessen. Think of it like waves coming in with the tide. So as the waves come in, they might come in at high tide, very high, and it's severe. And I think I was at high tide with knowing how my parents would feel. But in general, they let me know that over time it would lessen. It wouldn't maybe go away, but it would lessen to where it was more manageable. And I thought, wow, but I was so young. I hadn't yet married. I hadn't yet had children. I hadn't yet practiced medicine. And I love to take care of people. And I really realized in all these conversations that I had with these various glorious souls that our purpose here on life is really not about me at all, or you either. It's about how do we help those around us. And by design, we are sinners. We make mistakes. By design, we could have done things better. And I was struck by that because I hadn't been a perfect person. None of this happened to me because I am better than you. I'm not. I'm far from that. What happened was I really decided those people would be there when I returned on my final death. And I couldn't wait to see them again. But they'll always be there, and I know that. And I couldn't make a wrong choice. But the gift of life is a gift. And this place here is a place of learning. And by design, we are to learn about things that we can do better. So when we make a mistake, how can we honor and glorify God through that experience? And so for me, I really wanted to go back because I hadn't had the chance yet to do much of this learning. And all of a sudden, the most tremendous voice came out of nowhere, and it permeated all things and all people there. And it could have been God, it could have been Gabriel, the angel, it could have been who knows, but it was an authoritative voice. It really was not male or female. It was just an authoritative voice. And strongly it said, return, it's not your time. And then faster than any of this had happened, I'm going to pause a second and tell you, time-wise, I felt like I was there a half a day. I had the most wonderful, joyful time, spending a great deal of time talking to all of these glorious souls about many things, because that is what I like intellectually. I love that. And more quickly than I can begin to explain, quicker than, say, the blink of an eye, I exited this glorious place, and I went back through the darkness, back through the evil and the hatred that's commingled with love and goodness, back here on earth. They had since moved my body to a whole different location. I was in an intensive care unit, and I had a breathing machine breathing for me. And it's kind of like when you were a kid and you were playing baseball, and you ran from third base into home plate, and you skid into home plate. That's what you do. It's a hard landing, but it's right into your assigned body. And so I landed right into my assigned body, and immediately all my human characteristics were immediately restored. Good, bad, all of those things. But again, those things are by God's design. And when I landed, I could not stop smiling, even though this was an awful thing. And yes, I was paralyzed from here into my lungs, and they were squealing with glee. Oh, she's back, she's arrived, she's back. And so I had Guillain-Barré, and I had a variant of it called Jacksonian, which is a descending paralysis. Most people that have Guillain-Barré have an ascending paralysis, starting in their legs, moving up. And it's always symmetrical. And out of the people that have Guillain-Barré, there's groups of them that never fully recover. There's groups of them that have weakness, for example, in their hands and things like this. And it can take them 6 months to a year. Most of them peak at the worst with their paralysis at about 2 weeks. And so I was not quite at 2 weeks when all of this transpired. I was probably at about day 10. All told, I was in the hospital about a month. And I was in ICU for a full week. The amazing thing is I was extubated within a few hours of landing back in my body, which is remarkable, really miraculous. It shouldn't be like that. And then as soon as they took my tube out, I had written them a note. I wanted to see my father, but he had been in surgery at the time doing some emergency surgery, and he couldn't come see me until after that was completed. I just knew I needed to talk to him. So long story short, my neurologist and neurosurgeon came in and sat me down, and they said, you know, you really can't return to medical school. There's no way. You can't walk. You can't do what you need to do. Those are rigorous studies. You cannot do this. Let's have you think about something else to do. And I thanked him for that, but I said, you know, I will use good judgment. Just give me a return to school form, and I will use good judgment. I won't go back unless I think I can. And they over and over repeated to me that I really wouldn't be able to do this. And I knew logically they were right, but I had just been told otherwise. So I didn't tell them all that, but I just smiled at them. They gave me that form. And so I was in the hospital about a month away from school. I went back to school in a month. I would tell you it maybe took me a full year to completely get my body back to full recovery, to be able to walk well all the way across campus, to do what I needed to do. And I did graduate from medical school on time, which it is amazing when you think about it. But that's really the gist of my NDE. And this happened again in 1977. So I found myself starting to find people who'd had this happen. I found out in talking to my father that at the age of 4, he had an NDE, which he'd never told me about. And what happened to him is he got meningitis, viral meningitis in rural Iowa at the time, at the age of 4, and he went into a coma, and there was no treatment. And he apparently had near-death experience as well. He went to heaven, this place very similar to what I'm describing to you. But his journey was different in that he spent considerable time with Jesus as a child. But he wasn't really a child at that point. He said in heaven he was not really a young 4-year-old child there. He was just himself. His soul was there. I was surprised my father didn't tell me about it. And he said, well, like you, I was afraid you wouldn't understand. I was not sure of the words I would use to explain this to you. You might think I was crazy. And I didn't. But it was always comforting that he too had this happen. And my father died from a heart attack. I was able to be with him when he died. And so he passed away, and then 2 weeks later, my grandmother, his mother, passed away. And I found, going through my grandmother's things, I found this box. And in the bottom was this little diary she had. And it was entitled Little Herman. My father's name was Herman Hausheer. And it was about little Herman. And she had written daily in this diary about my father. And I sat on the floor, the concrete floor, to read my grandmother's writing. And sure enough, in that diary, she talked about how little Herman got very sick at about 1931. That was the year that this happened to him. And then she left the pages blank when he went into a coma. And then she started writing again how she serves a wonderful God because her prayers were answered. Little Herman woke up from this viral meningitis, and then she talked about how he had an imaginary playmate these days, and he talked in first person as if Jesus was his best buddy. And she couldn't figure out why he was doing this. But I knew that I was supposed to find this diary of my grandmother's, even though she's gone and I can't talk to her, my father's gone, I can't talk to him. But it's in this book, everything my father had said. So it was an interesting journey, but that I could go on with more, but that's probably the gist of it. Myself really searched the Word of God to find my answers to that. And where, if I were to die today, in my final death, I would go to a place called present heaven. It's not final heaven, it's present heaven. And that's where we all go right now. And this place is something I've read quite a bit about in the Word of God. There's much in there about it, as far as it's a place of extreme and pure love. That is probably the only thing I could say about it, other than it's a place of extraordinary beauty. There's nothing there that is, like I said, evil. There's nothing, it's not permitted in there. There's no bad feelings, there's no bad memories, there's no bad anything. And the other glorious souls that are there are amazing. They love with an extraordinary love, and you as well do. And time there, it's not that time doesn't exist there, it's just different than here. It seems to move at a faster pace there compared to here. So all told, on my NDE, I was down, because I went and looked at the records, I was down for 17 minutes when this happened to me. But I felt like I was a half day or more in this place of heaven, having all these conversations which were very meaningful when I was there. So time is different in this place. It's not that it doesn't exist, it's just different. Spatially, it's different than here, in that there's no expenditure of energy when you move from one place to another, when you communicate, if you will, with the other glorious souls there. It transcends the wildest of imaginations. It's what we describe as ineffable. It's difficult to explain, but it's real and it does exist. And it's a place that, people here on this side, on Earth's side, they may debate the existence of heaven and hell. They may debate these issues, but the moment anyone dies, whether it's near death or final death, it's irrefutable. You either go to this place that I went to, of heaven, or you go to hell. As far as how do you get there, one might ask that. I didn't land there because I'm better than you or somebody else, because I'm not. I'm far from it. But I made a commitment truly as a young kid to follow Jesus and the teachings of Jesus. And I, throughout my childhood, up until that age of 20, was the kind of person that always, I'm going to say, yik-yacked with God. I still do. So I argue with him all the time. He knows when I'm going to argue with him, because I'll argue and say, I'm not able to do this. I'm not equipped to do this. I am not the best person for this. This person would be better to do this than I am. So I argue with him all the time. And he expects this of me, but he always is right. And he's always, I'm wrong, he's always right. And I always do what he asks. But I complain. I do complain, because I argue in my human way about why that doesn't make sense, that I'm being asked to do this thing, because I argue with him. But he knows this about me, and I know he knows this about me. But that's, I hope that helps answer a little bit about it. If this had not happened to me, I don't know that I would feel the same way I'm going to share with you. And that is to say that the meaning of life when you're 20 years old is different than at 67, when you've gone through life. But add in a near-death experience, and I know the meaning of life for me is all about my relationships with all people here that I encounter or that I'm around. And I have full control of whether I am kind, whether I am compassionate to my fellow people around me, and that matters. And then in conjunction with that, when I then go through my final death and I return to heaven, it's so important that I have the pleasure of knowing the various people who, in even some small way, my act of kindness or my act of compassion towards them or my conversations with them about God, about these things, made a difference in them.